specific, which I readily admit is my favorite category of fruit trees. Stone fruits are peaches, nectarines, plums, fluots, apricots. It's technically almonds, but I usually don't get a lot of questions about them, so I won't be covering that. I don't know very much about them, actually. But the neat thing about the stone fruit grouping is that they're all genetically similar enough that you can graft them onto each other. So if you started with an almond, and you'll like almonds, and you want to get something else off of it, you can technically put any other fruit tree and graft it onto that tree. So, well, yeah, any other stone fruit and graft it onto that almond tree. Do any of you have a fruit salad tree? Yeah, so fruit salad tree will have peach, nectarine, plum, and apricot all on the same tree. They are, in my opinion, like a medium to hard level tree to take care of.
Oh, this roll mix?
Yeah.
Round two.
Yeah, so the fruit salad trees are like, it's like you've got 4 heads on this tree. They have 4 different personalities. You have 3 different pruning styles that it would benefit from. So I get to go into a little more detail. Short that has branches.
They're not together.
So
Better you than me.
I'm going to go over a little more pruning finesse in this section. So this is I think it's Sugar May. Yeah, Sugar May white peach. White peaches are sweeter. Yellow peaches are more sweet and tart. Usually better for baking. They're still good for baking with this different. With this one, this is on a yellow tag. This is level peach rootstock. I love level rootstock. I love having full-size rootstock on peaches and nectarines. I've just found, like, in my 10 years of pruning and, you know, troubleshooting in the nursery, peaches and nectarines on citation rootstock, as much as they're a smaller tree, and it is the default, it's what someone's going to sell you if you don't ask. They're a smaller tree by habit, but they tend to have thinner growth, weaker growth. They're a little more susceptible to lesions and diseases. And they might fruit a lot, but they're just not as strong. And so with this one, I love this one. This is great. See how nice and thick his branches? This is a nice amount of healthy growth. Pencil thick, as I call it. You want a majority of your branches to be pencil thick. If they're thinner than a pencil or they're weak, you should probably take them off. Deal with that. So I'm just going to do a little pruning on this guy. Peaches and nectarines, they fruit on the branches that grew last year. And so this section here to here, I've got my growth ring down here separating. The color is different and also has a full 360. So I know this is last year's growth. This is the area I'm pruning, mostly. And I usually keep 2/3 of the branch on peaches and nectarines if they are healthy and ribbed. This one's got a good, like I'd start at the year mark and kind of give pressure to see where does it start to bend a lot. This is a great healthy branch. If I was going to do that on, say, this one, I think I can kind of tell it's bendy. It's very bendy. It probably got damaged here earlier on. And so this is the kind where, like, if it's like this, it's not going to be able to bear the weight of a fruit. And so something like this.
Before you cut,
Yeah.
the suspension testing.
Sure.
So this is something that my neighbor advised me when buying a used car to, you know, shake the car. Suspension, like, does it come back quickly? And then we
This translates to fruit trees.
Yeah, we applied that to fruit trees too. And if you do a little shake, a lot
Especially
of times you
on
can,
an older tree.
yeah, you can really see certain parts will start wobbling a lot.
So if
and
I go like this, the parts that vibrate the most, the longest.
Yeah, are
will
often
be the
what needs to
ones-
be trimmed.
Yeah, and you'll see it on a big tree in particular. I can do that little suspension like this. This is wobbling a lot. How it's bendy here. This should have been strong growth from last year. It's actually a whole year's growth here. The color is all 1 year growth. But because it's weak here, I probably wouldn't keep very much of it. I usually will start where it starts to bend, and then I'll go a little past it maybe, because it might strengthen up this last section here. Here, the bud is facing out and away from the core of the tree, that's what's going to continue in this direction. Peaches and nectarines tend to not grow back from heading cuts very well on branches that are more than 1 year old. Heading cut is where I would do this, but on like an older cut, where I don't have any side branches I'm cutting back to. So if you have older sections, like I was going to cut into this 2-year-old section, I wouldn't want to cut somewhere that didn't have a branch. Like I wouldn't want to cut here. I'd want to cut to what's called a reduction or a drop crotch cut, and cut back to a side branch that's already pre-existing. They do better that way. They don't like coming back from heading cuts. They usually don't come back from heading cuts. So we're gonna do a kind of touch test on everything. If you can keep even 1 or 2 buds, even on the weak ones, if there's enough that's strong, it might continue out and do something good for you later. If it's broken, right up to the trunk, do not cut flush. You want to leave a 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch so that it heals properly. So, especially when you have a brand new tree, you don't want to keep anything that's really weak. You're going to end up with a broken branch later that you are more emotionally attached to. And it hurts to have to cut that off or watch it break later. So strength test on everything. This one's really weak. Let's see, I'll just cut it real short. And this one's really strong, so I'm going to keep 2/3. I'm going to cut to an outward facing bud. This one's a little bit weaker. It's bending more around here. Because it's only a year 1, year 2 tree, I am not pruning for fruit, I'm pruning for structure. But if this was a normal older tree, this is, that 2/3 is usually the amount you would keep, and you would still cut back ones that were weak. But if you had a lot of healthy branches, most of them you would be keeping 2/3. The best fruit is in the middle, 2/3 on a peach or nectarine. Sorry, yeah, middle 1/3. Why? Just what I've noticed. And you can tell which buds are what. There's going to be either a single bud and it's a leaf bud, or there'll be a double bud with a tiny leaf bud in the middle, and the double buds are the fruit buds. So, strength test, this one, again, I'll start where the ear ring was, kind of touch, starts bending here. But your first year of pruning should be kind of severe, honestly. We're trying to equal out the fact that the roots probably had some removed. So this would be, this one's broken here. So that would be like a starting shape for the tree. And then I can kind of see is anything out of balance. Do I want it to be taller in the middle? And if not, I might cut it back so that it's more of a fruit bush. This is going to be a lovely, short, compact, easy to harvest fruit bush that you can keep at 6 feet for many years if you prune it back every year. Even though it's on full-size level, I have a full-size nectarine that is year 3 in a pot. Pot starts around here, tree is here, and I'm keeping it small very easily. Any questions?
It's a full-sized nectarine in the pot?
Yep.
Wow.
It's a science experiment of mine. I'm seeing how long I can keep it in the pot before it protests. It's in a 25-gallon plastic nursery can. I think this is year 4 for the tree, year 3 that I've had it. I haven't done any root pruning yet, but I'm going to expect that I might need to within 2 years, so I'm going to keep it in the pot.
On average, how many fruits do you got?
I haven't gotten any yet because the squirrels took them all. But before the squirrels, I think I had around, the very first year, I think 2 years ago, we got around 8. But it's a small canopy, and I'm not, I grow a lot of trees that the tree calls to me, I buy it, I keep it, I prune it, and then I sell it to a customer of mine, because I do a lot of pruning in the area. And so I'm not as concerned about pruning, but if I was letting it fruit, like if I wanted to really let it fruit, I would build an enclosure around it, because it's so small that I could do that, and then I would cover it with netting, and I'd probably get somewhere around 20 fruit, I'd say, for a small canopy, like it could fit in my arms, keeping it very small. Yeah. You do that with the citation rootstock for a lot longer, keeping it in a pot. The full size, it's my ongoing science experiment. We're at 3 years. Yeah, question?
Yeah, so because it fruits on last year growth, at some point the tree grows so that you don't have another year. So what do you do? Like, you bring it back, you take some limbs, you bring them back, you regrow. How do you manage this?
So, for peaches and nectarines specifically, they just kind of keep going. If you've never pruned it or you only prune minimally, you'll have these like 5-foot bare sections with growth on the last 6 inches. And if you haven't been planning from the beginning for that potential problem, you're a little bit screwed. They don't like to be cut back to a heading cut where it's just a lock. They don't respond well from that. It's a gamble if you do it. So the best way is honestly from the beginning, pruning every year, pruning every single stem. Because when you prune right below the cut, it's going to fork. And so you're creating your future branching to cut back to. In commercial agricultural settings, they will have no more than 2 or 3 year old wood on a peach or nectarine sometimes, because they're constantly cutting it back and letting it regrow from lower side branches over and over again. And so the answer is you make sure that you've got side branching to cut back to later by pruning from the beginning. Does that make sense? Yeah. You know, I need a plumber to have someone in the line. Who are the genetic?
Oh,
Alright,
man.
so
Can I ask you, maybe it's about the same thing. I have a nectar Z and a pick Z.
hey,
Okay.
that's what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
okay. What about pruning on those?
Yeah, so let's do some pruning.
Okay.
So this is a genetic dwarf on a full-size rootstock. I don't recommend putting this in a pot, but if you wanted to, you would probably need to prune the roots every 2 to 4 years. Take it out, bare root it, prune the roots. So it's not really one for being in a pot. The full-size roots are because it has this very dense growth habit. The buds are very close to each other. Pruning on these is usually just cutting out the damage. So I'm looking for things that are black, looking for things that are broken, and we cut those out. And then once I've gotten that out, I'm really just thinning to avoid congestion. And I might tip prune something that maybe hasn't branched yet. The main thing with these genetic dwarves is that you need to thin the fruit. If you don't thin the fruit, you're going to lose a whole lot, because there's just not enough space. You know, in this one little section here, I've got 15 buds. And in this one section, I've got 7 fruit buds. That's space for 1 or 2 nectarines. So you have to thin on these ones. And if you don't, they will thin themselves, but then you're losing the energy from the fruit.
What
So,
size is the fruit?
These ones are medium, probably so big. Yeah. They fruit well, but it's a smaller tree. They only get 6 feet, maybe 5. And I think that they tend to blossom a little early. The blossoms aren't super cold hardy, and so some people have to cover them. But getting this to a nice, like these two are going the exact same direction. I would actually take out one of them to give it space. That would be kind of a thinning cut. So then otherwise on this, nothing really needs it. Everything seems to have enough space. It's not super structurally strong, so I might prune back. That's not a normal problem once they're past year 1. But I would just kind of touch every branch, and if it's not strong, cut it back to where it starts to bend, so that you have more rigidity, so you can handle the weight of the fruit.
At what
Yeah.
point do you thin the fruit?
When it's downside. Yeah. You can, like, as soon as it's big enough that you can, and use a pair of scissors. Don't just use your hand, because it'll break off a whole cluster sometimes if you use your hand.
I've done that.
And you want to have probably, like, for something like this, 2 to 3 per 6 inches maximum. Yeah, kind of like pick ones that are facing almost like in a whirl, so that you have one on this side, one on this side, one on this side. Space them out so they literally physically have space.
Something Rose said earlier, but say it a little more clearly. When you've got let's just imagine all these side branches are here, and just this long straight, and then you've got a little poof at the end, kind of like this, it's exaggerated. Just taking this last little bit, just snipping that, is going to encourage it to branch. So that is something to consider when you're pruning, especially on peaches and nectarines ahead of time. If the length is not long and you want to keep it, just take the little tip off it, and otherwise you end up with that pattern of extreme length, breaking, no side branching to come back to.
Yeah, if this was like a normal branch, you know, on a painted nectarine. Like this is the terminal bud at the end. This was the beginning of this. I would keep 2/3. You don't want to keep the last 1/3. It's not structurally strong, and also if you do, it probably will not make any side branches. So if you take off that last bit, this bud here, this bud here, this bud here, one of these next 3 down will push out side branching, and then you're setting your future self up with branching to cut back to. If I had this and it branched here and I let it grow for 4 years, these side branches would still be there, and I could cut the whole section back to this side branching I made early on to reduce the tree back and then encourage new wood.
Do you need to worry about sunburn?
Yes, you need to worry about sunburn. Absolutely. Especially peaches and nectarines.
For stone fruits or in general?
I'd say stone fruit. I think most fruits you gotta worry about sunburn. Persimmons don't seem to get it as much. Figs don't seem to get it as much. Pomegranates don't seem to get it as much. But if you have an open center where there's a lot of exposed wood, you can use just like a regular old paint. You know, a brown color, you're not gonna really see it much. If you have injuries you need to work with, or bigger injuries, I use like the kind of higher quality sealant, the Doc Barwell's. I use this a lot. It's a latex paint. It kind of stretches and contracts with the weather and the temperature a little better. But this one is, you know, cheaper, and it's gonna do well just for the sunburn part. Yeah, any of the interior branches or exposed sunny side branches.
How
you would wanna
often?
do. I see a lot of sunburn on peaches and nectarines that have very open centers.
Yeah.
So every year paint it?
No, just don't paint it every year. Just paint it as needed. If you have a lot of growth that came, maybe paint that new section. But the interior in particular, the core center, is the part you want to make sure it stays painted. If the paint degrades, maybe top it off every few years. Yeah.
Do you allow some vertical branches maybe just for a little bit of shading?
Yeah, and so
It went quite crazy. Like
yeah, to keep some shading in the interior, you can keep short branches that are going into the center. That's totally fine. Have some short branches. You don't need it to be naked on the inside bowl.
It's better if it's not. Like
Yeah,
like
it's a balance for sure.
you don't get sunburn if there's enough branching and leaf coverage over the older branches that are just bark, right? But often that's not what happens. You say you have one big branch that breaks. Now the sun's coming into the center and it's getting baked all summer long, and that's when you need some sunscreen for your tree.
I have questions. One second. Just find me like a bump in this section over here that you think is good. Cool. Question? Yes?
I have hair tree, and so I cut it short. And so when you cut it, the next time it will shoot all over.
Yeah.
So I just cut all those that shoots out. Is that right?
So when cutting your pear, you got a lot of new shoots response. The time of year will dictate how much response you get. If you prune it in winter, you're gonna get a whole bunch of response growth. If you're trying to slow it down, you wanna prune it in the summertime. And you don't need to do all of it in the summertime. You're just doing like the haircut, the outer exterior. Like if you had a laser beam, you're just doing that. Yeah.
I found you a sad one that really needs to be pruned.
Yay!
Oh no.
Oh, nice.
Is it too tall for what we're doing?
No, I got it. Okay, so if I was going to train this into a nice something, first off, this is a weeping tree, so I'm not going to prune it as hard as I would anything else.
Okay.
But I still,
What is it?
this is a weeping Santa Rosa.
Okay.
Weeping Santa Rosa's,
That's
the
what I've
pruning's
got.
totally different. You want them to get weighed down by their own fruit weight. It's crazy. But if I wanted to fix this, I wouldn't just cut it up here. I'm going to go down to a nice lower section. This is called a drop crotch cut. And I would do a nice little angle there. And see how I've left a bit of a stub on the top? I wouldn't want to go any lower than that. I want to leave that stub so it's not just a flush cut so that it can heal properly. If I was doing yearly pruning on this is a normal tree, plums can make fruit spurs off the entire length as early as year 1. Like first year, they can make fruit off of it. But usually you're going to get side spurs that develop year 2 through 4. They're going to...
How old is this one?
Yeah.
How old is this tree?
is, let's see, 2. I think 2 or 3. So I got a year mark here. So 1 here, and then I think it's honestly just 2 years old. Yeah, but it's on a full-size rootstock, and it was probably given some very specific fertilizers. Okay, so we'll go over the fruit buds a little more.
Oh, there you go.
Location of fruit buds. This is a pluot. This is fruit spurs. This is your fruit wood. When they start getting these dense clusters like this is great. You're gonna get fruit all over these. So when you see these little short knobby bits, it's not sick,
Don't cut
not
'em
bad.
off.
This is ideal. You want to have nice fruit wood like this. And then the new growth that comes out every year. Is gonna look, you know, smaller and shorter and have like new growth on it. But yeah, like this plum, there's no fruit spurs on this right now. It's not gonna fruit this year. It might, if it had like a really long section, sometimes it fruits on the growth that happened at the beginning of the year. It's kind of weird like that. But usually like the following year is when it sets fruit on everything aside from peaches and nectarines. It's okay.
But it looks so sad.
I know, it needed that. The future owner will be happy with that.
So if you
Okay.
want to keep the plum small, it won't hurt to take a third or 2/3 off.
Yeah. If you want to keep your tree small from the beginning, you can keep as little
Well, 8 feet.
as sure. 1 to 2 handspans of new growth. And I'm going to show you that on the one that
That's
he's
great.
grabbing. Yeah. So I love having small, compact little trees. And if I have a really old tree that like I'm maintaining, sometimes all I keep is literally the length of a finger of new growth. Very, very small, 1 or 2 inches.
Wow.
So for this guy, first I'm going to cut off, you know, whenever you're pruning, you're cutting off dead, damaged, diseased, or disoriented. Disoriented is crossing and rubbing branches. It's branches that have a less than ideal connection angle, which is perfect for. Yeah, so you see this one? My hand's on right here. It's a steep attachment angle right here. This has a spar tissue forming between these 2 branches, and if I leave it, eventually it's probably just going to break off and cause a tear that runs down the length of the main trunk. So
A spreader won't fix it, right?
a spreader will not fix this. It's too steep. You wouldn't want to keep that. You could put a spreader if you couldn't remove it for some reason, but ideally you would just take it off at the beginning before you are emotionally attached. So with this one, I'm just going to start by looking for the damaged parts. I'm looking for that stress test. Where is it bending from? And then they get damaged in transit from the main nursery. And you could leave some of them, and it might strengthen, but see how they're all bending kind of like here? Really close?
Yeah.
That is an internal damage that happened in transit. And you just want to take it out to begin and start with a healthy beginning. These short sections will probably end up making fruit spurs for a few years. When you only keep the very beginning part, it kind of forces that part to do its next step sooner. Sometimes it just starts branching instead and shoots out a new branch, and you can kind of respond to that. But whenever you're buying a brand new tree, you need to check all the branches. My obsession for the next, 2-3 weeks will be going through and trying to prune all of the trees on the floor, but there's only one of me, and there was 1,400 trees. So your job is to make sure that your tree gets pruned either by yourself or someone else that knows what they're doing. But you're just looking for the strong branches. You're cutting back anything that's super weak, and you're going to end up having some that are strong and core up here. But if not, it's better to start with a smaller tree that'll explode that first year and set new strong branches that weren't stressed or broken, instead of trying to hold on to the ones that you started with.
Okay, in the case of a mature fruit tree, every year we get a whole bunch of vertical water spouts that come up. So what we've been doing is taking those off, is that right? Or
So if you have a mature fruit tree and you're getting water spouts every year, let's analyze the name that you gave it, water spouts.
I don't know what the right name is, it's a vertical.
Yeah.
Right, but how often is the tree being watered? Because if it's being watered excessively, it will make vertical shoots to move the water away from the root system faster. So if it's an old tree and it's a, what kind of tree? Persimmon. It should not be watered more than once a month.
How about plum? Same with the plum and the Asian pear.
Same.
But we're not
When
gonna
they
water-
have vertical
Yeah.
shoots, you can take them out. However, you should probably switch your pruning to include summer pruning when it's an older tree. So if this was an older tree, I would go and do the yearly haircut of keeping maybe 1 to 2 hand spans. I would do that in summer instead on all the new growth on the exterior. And then you would come in winter and do any internal minutia, but by cutting off a lot of the excessive length that you want to slow down, by cutting in summer, the hormones in the tree will be different in response, and you'll get less growth.
So you do it after the fruit, after you harvest, you
Depends on
basically
the
slap
variety.
the brakes.
Yeah, when you do it depends on the variety. If it's a summer ripening one, it kind of lines up with you're going to do it after harvest anyway. But if it's like an apple, that haircut, that new wood doesn't have fruit because they only develop fruit spurs on 2-year-old or older branching. So if you're on a yearly maintenance schedule of pruning and you're trying to reduce that overall size, or at least keep it under control, you can do that external haircut even if there's fruit on it, because there won't be any fruit on the growth that grew this year.
So it won't affect the fruit. It will slow the growth, but it will not affect the fruit.
Yep. And then if you wanted to do any like internal cuts, you're trying to thin out an area, maybe it does have fruit on it, then it's your call of if you want to slow it down more and prune it in summer and maybe lose the fruit on the section you're removing, or if you want to do the removal and the reduction and the thinning in stages over a few years in winter, where you will get a response to that growth, and at least then you're not losing the fruit. And that's a personal decision you have to make. Okay, so again, just coming back, and a lot of these branches they have a stress point down low. If it's not too bad, I'm not seeing like an actual bowing, I'm not seeing it go like this. I can keep that to 1 to 2 handspans of new growth. I tend to keep less. This one's pretty strong, so I can keep it to 2. This one will keep a little more. And I'm going to come back and do a second pass. Move the chair. You don't want to remove everything all at once. You want to cut some and then maybe come back and be like, okay, actually let's adjust that back down a little bit more. Because you can't put it back on. See, this one's bending a lot. And this is something I'll sometimes do on mature trees. This is one where a limb spreader might help. And you can spread it like this. It's still very steeply attached. Now this is where I have the decision to make of, I'll try to find me a longer one. There's some in the apple multi-grams.
Okay.
Do you sell those? Yeah, we sell these. These are limb spreaders. I could use this to open up this branch into an angle that I like better, and then after a year I can take it out and it's going to stay in that shape. Works best on 1-year-old branches, a lot harder with older branches. They get rigid after a year.
Would it be a problem if you
We're getting there.
Oh, okay.
So, totally. So, could I just cut it down here? I would. I am a huge fan of fruit bushes. I don't need to walk under my tree. I want to harvest right here. If I wanted to turn this into a fruit bush, all I would have to do is cut it down here, and then these are all going to grow up, and I would train them from there. And so some of the longer limb spreaders like this are better for if you have maybe it's more rigid at the bottom, but the top is more flexible, or you have just a bigger gap to span. The limb spreaders are really good for that. So with this one, I don't know who's going to buy this tree. So I'm gonna keep my pruning a little light, at least for the moment. But I try and cut everything the first year especially. But let's just say I wanted to turn into a fruit bush. If I want a fruit bush, I would keep 3 to 5 branches going off kind of in a radial central pattern, like a whirl. So I'd have kind of multiple going out in different directions, not all going in the same direction. So like these 2 right here are combating, so I would check, okay, which one's stronger, this one or this one? Which one do I like better? If I remove one, how's it going to affect the other ones? So I would take off let's just make this a fruit bush. This is going to be a fruit bush. So start with at least 3 evenly spaced branches. I'm going to go like this, and then that one's coming out because it had too steep of an attachment angle, and then it would just get cut right down here where this pink tag is. And then it would continue out from there, and I would train it. I'm going to leave this because I don't know who's going to buy it. They could have what's called a central leader with multiple tiers. We got 1 tier of fruit down here, and the next tier would develop up here. You've got space in between for some sunshine. It'll kind of look like a 2-ball topiary, but not as, round. But that concept of having a little space in between, you can do it that way and then keep it to that small shape pretty well.
So if you have in your garden more vertical space than horizontal space, would you go for central leader?
If you have
to use the
if you have more vertical space, then I might go for having multiple tiers on one
with a central
leader. Yeah, but it depends what width you're talking about, because I could keep this tree to 4 feet wide easily with just kind of controlling the growth and then letting it still keep going up. Especially if I'm doing the summer pruning to slow down the growth. And when you do summer pruning also, like, it really actually does switch the plant's future plans into doing more fruit wood. If you prune the same branch in winter and then prune its buddy right next to it in summer on the same year, like one summer and then one winter, the next year, the branch that was pruned in summer will probably have a more noticeable amount of fruit wood that developed on it. Just a little bit.
So,
Yep.
a lot of the advice for early, already asking which branch.
Yep. Yeah, so yeah.
Let me, real quick.
Oh yeah.
These are great limb spreaders. This is also a limb spreader, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah, so
Just kinda-
natural limb spreaders, you take 2
I didn't do
sticks
it.
that you've actually cut out of the tree in your pruning, just kind of twist them, and then you can plop them right in and still spread your
Right
branches.
into the branch like that, and they stay really nice typically because they have a little bit of a.
Yeah, you gotta get the.
Not a good example, but once you get it right, they stay.
Yeah.
Try not to break it.
But you can use those natural spreaders. So if you have an older tree and you're trying to maintain it, usually it takes 2 to 4 years to get it back into what I consider maintenance level. And so you would end up doing winter pruning, summer pruning, winter pruning, summer pruning, and then by that 3rd winter, you're probably at a way better manageable state. It's not a lost cause. I would have to see it to be like, ooh, actually, maybe that is a lost cause. But usually it's not, unless there's injuries, disease. Those are the things that maybe if the tree wasn't handled well in terms of like watering, if the watering was wrong its whole life, it can have a huge impact on whether or not it can actually bounce back and be a healthy tree. Yeah. But if you have a big tree and you're trying to, get it to that maintenance level, you would start by taking off everything dead and age. Then you would look at areas that have congestion. You have branches that are rubbing and crossing. You would look at it when there's foliage on it or when it's bare, both. So that summer pruning, you can kind of see where is there no light coming in, and then look at that branch and kind of follow it. What's going to come out if I remove this branch? And start making pockets for sunlight to come through at various parts of the tree. And you do that process over and over the course of a few years. Until in the summer you have many pockets of sunlight coming in, but not like a full front load. That would be the goal.
A question.
Yeah.
Does this pruning techniques applies to citrus fruits like oranges and lemons as well?
This
Or they are
pruning
different?
technique that I'm talking about is currently geared towards stone fruits and deciduous. Citrus and those type, you can still do the dead, damaged, diseased, disoriented. That's kind of a general pruning for anything. Look for dead, damaged, diseased, or disoriented. Crossing branches. Look for rootstock suckers coming out from the base of the plant and remove those. Those are basics. Where you prune on the branch, how much you keep, might be different. Yeah, and that would be a completely separate class. Question?
I have slopes. Are apples and apricots do okay on slopes?
If you have slopes, you can absolutely plant things, but you need to plan for how you're going to manage erosion. How are you planting it? Are you cutting out from the hillside and then pushing it out and making a little flat spot? Or are you just kind of cutting out and planting it? I had one customer that came in a month ago. He was talking about he had a slope. He kind of cut out a section, pushed it out, and planted here. But the whole thing sank lower. And so he had his slope that was like this, but it was like, whoop, and it was having a lot of drainage issues, even though it was on a slope, because the spot that the tree was itself sank. Whenever you plant a tree, this little baby here, ground level should be here. You should have a little mound on both sides of the tree so that it is raised above ground about 20%. For any and all plants, honestly, but especially fruit trees, especially avocados. Oh my gosh, don't ever plant an avocado flush to the ground, it's gonna die. Totally different topic, but worth mentioning. And this guy, yeah, if I was planting this, soil level would be here, and I would have a little mound on both sides. I'd have some mulch on top of that, and so the whole thing would look a little raised, but within a year, it would probably settle down to grade. Yeah. Question.
How would you prune that little stick you just put down?
How would I prune this little stick? Well, this is an apricot, so I would prune it in summer, but I would only prune it if I wanted low branching right now. This is just a baby, you know, 1 year old. It's on a full-size rootstock, so it's gonna get 20 feet, maybe 25. I wouldn't prune it for a while. If I wanted to have low branching, I might just remove the tip to force it to branch right below that. And then I could have a nice low fruit bush where the branching started down here. Sometimes if you have a central leader like that, all you gotta do is remove literally one bud, and then it forces it to branch right below that.
Wow.
It's called tipping. Yeah. Any other questions?
Interesting.
Okay. You want to find me a foreign one? Fruit salad. They are right past the guy in the straight jacket. Golden wrap. That'll be good. I'd be right before him, actually. Look to your right. They should be in there. Yeah. So it's kind of strange. I had a lot of you in the first part, so I went over a lot of the basics. Is there anything that, in particular, anyone wanted me to go over? If you have a personal problem question with your trees? Yeah.
I asked a lot of questions. So
Yeah. So I have pear and apple pear trees. Last year it had lots of those black things inside. Maybe some bug eggs or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you have black things in the center of your apples.
Yeah.
So that's codling moth. It's a larva of a moth. It's pretty difficult to control.
Yes, it is.
But you start by doing horticultural oil spray and liquid copper in winter. This is something I recommend for pretty much all fruit trees. You take about 2 to 4 ounces of both of these, you dilute it in a gallon of water, you spray the tree top to bottom. You do it December, January, February.
Combine them?
Combine.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. They are made to be used together.
All right. You don't have to do separate ones.
How many gallons per tree?
It depends on the size of your tree.
Right.
It absolutely depends. Sometimes, like I have a bunch of baby trees, and like I have lots this size, and I'll go through 1 or 2 gallons, and that's it. Using a little pump sprayer, you just spray it top to bottom. I really make a point to coat my peaches and nectarines because they get peach leaf curl. If you have peach leaf curl and you spray it with this when the buds are swelling, there's a stage called the popcorn stage, and the buds go from being flat like this, and then they swell and they swell, and then they show the pink. When they're round and popcorn, that's when you spray for peaches and nectarines. The fungal spore that makes the peach leaf curl is resting in the little
This is
bits.
like perfect for spraying.
Perfect. Yeah, this is the perfect state. So the little actual like scale of flowers itself around it, that's where the spore goes dormant. And as soon as it wakes up, they come out of the cracks and they travel down and they infect the leaves that are going to come out. So this is when you would spray, when they're nice and round little popcorns. This is a, yeah?
Sorry, the liquid cop would be for the peach leaf pearl, and the horticultural oil is for little beasts and little insects
So,
or whatever? Or?
yeah, so the liquid copper is for fungal problems. The horticultural oil is for pests. Peaches definitely get both. There's a lot of aphids or scale or whitefly that peaches can get, but also it's worth doing anyway, because if you just spray the liquid copper, it's watery and it's not going to stay as long, and it might just wash right off in the rains. Yeah, so it's definitely good to do both. This is tropic snow. It's on a full-size rootstock. I love them on full-size rootstocks. Peaches and nectarines on full-size are great. This is an ornamental white peach, which is really cool. So not only does it have a really good low chill peach, it has gorgeous blossoms as well, and it's a white peach, so it's really sweet. So I really like this one. For pruning on this, honestly, I'd probably remove most of the side branches because they're just so weak. And I would just maybe tip the top because I like my fruit bush. If I didn't want a fruit bush, I would only cut off the side branches. If you're trying to make it taller, you do pruning on the sides. If you're trying to make it shorter, you make sure to remove the tips. Whenever you prune, if you take the tips off, it creates lateral side branching. If you take the sides off, it makes tip growth. And so those two things are kind of in constant exchange of nutrients, different hormone reactions. One suppresses the other. Yeah. Question?
So I have a peach tree that grows like crazy, like hundreds of different roots, but then they all drop before it mature, except one branch.
Is it a single variety or is it a multi-graft?
It's a yellow peach.
So you're saying you have a peach that grows really, really well,
Yeah.
and only one branch fruits well. I would first check where your branching is and make sure that you don't have any rootstock coming from below. Okay, because sometimes you might have one where the tree got stressed, and when the top graft gets stressed, because technically this is two trees right here, a little graft union down here, and the rootstock is here below, and then here and above is the tropic snow peach. And so if you ever have any growth coming from the rootstock, that is a different fruit. And it might not fruit, or if it does fruit, it might be bitter, or it might be like really, really watery.
If you're consistently having one branch that's acting different as the others, it seems likely that it's a different variety one way or the other. So
It might be a natural mutation. That's how they get varieties sometimes.
and I don't know without looking at the tree, but sometimes it's not as clear as you might think whether it's rootstock. I can't say for sure, but if the graft was made up high, like 3 feet, all the branches above that are one variety, and if you
like
have a
here,
branch,
this is where the graft is here.
yeah, if you have a branch
But
from here, that's going to be rootstock.
Usually it's
even
like
though it's not
a
literally
few inches
coming.
from the
It
ground.
comes from the bottom.
Yeah, so check and make sure. Sometimes a tree might get planted too deep, and the rootstock graft union is buried, and you can't actually tell where things are coming from. So you want to find and identify your graft union, which will sometimes be really obvious. It'll have a bit of like a straight and then a jig. Sometimes it's a really clean graft, and all you can see is it'll be straight in a line with like a little vertical or a diagonal slice scar, and that's it. So you want to find the graft union and remove anything below it. And if there's anything below it, that was rootstock. And if it is above it, then at that point I would prune yearly, make sure I'm watering correctly, make sure I'm fertilizing correctly, and thin the fruit when they're dime sized.
Yeah, I tried, but
So much, right?
they all premature. They all drop premature, except that one branch. That one ugly branch.
Huh.
It's ugly.
Bring me a
but-
picture sometime. I'd love to have a better conversation with more information.
Okay.
Yeah, question.
How do you, this general question, how do you manage fruit trees near a fence where you have a fence, you want to plant near the fence, but then you have like this kind of like a sandwich between the fence and like whatever.
Yeah, how do you do informal espalier next to a fence would be how I would phrase that question.
Yeah, but you have more space than just
Yeah.
espalier.
So espalier, this is a formal espalier. Totally formal. It's got nice straight lines. An informal espalier is when you're just trying to keep it between this space. Here's the
Yeah.
fence, here's your walkway, you want
Yeah.
to keep
4
it
or
here.
5 feet.
Yeah, and so you would prune the forward and back part a little harder than the sides, first off. And make sure that you're pruning off as much as you can in the summertime. Make sure you're doing summer pruning to equal it out. I have one customer that I think all she has, you know that one next to Preserve? The fence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's got this fence, and she's got, I think, like 6 fruit trees in a row, and none of them are taller than the 5-foot fence, and they all have maybe like 3 feet of space to grow, and everything coming off the front and everything going too close to the fence, we prune really short. And everything going up and out, we maintain. We're constantly doing drop crotch catches, where if you've got a branch like this, getting too tall, I'll cut it back to a side branch like this, and then I'll shorten that branch too. So I'm reducing it, and then I'm shortening as well to constantly be pulling it back in. If something gets excessive, you find a drop crotch and you cut it back again the following year. But pruning in the summer definitely slows it down, and you want to keep that area next to the fence pretty clear, because it's not going to have as good of airflow, and it's really hard to work with. If it's a fence, yeah, you can't access it, or if it's a chain link fence, it's going to grow through, and then maybe deer are getting to it anyway, and it's just a mess. It's really hard to access.
Are these trees already in the ground that you're talking
Not
about?
yet.
Okay.
Some not yet. Some
Yeah,
are.
so
Where you can, make sure you split the difference between the fence too, because one of the problems we see plenty, I think Rose mentioned earlier, is
planted too close. to
really
the
close
fence.
on one side. There's no room for the branches to grow, and then you've got all your branching on this side, and the tree's not going to be balanced very well.
Mhm.
What about the sun? Oh,
So one other thing. So he was talking about kind of splitting the difference. So if the two are here, planting in the middle, very important. And pruning both sides, front and back, equal. You don't want to let the front have more weight simply because it can. You want to let the sides have more of the space for you, or the upward part if that's all you have. Yeah. Question.
Yeah, I have a really huge apricot tree, maybe 40, 50 years old.
Woo! Okay.
Still doing well,
Large
but I
apricot.
don't know how to spray it. I mean, what kind of sprayer can I use?
Yeah, if you have a really big tree, how do you spray it? There's these ones that it's a hose end attachment style, and then it has a liquid chamber that you would put the concentrate into, and you hook it up to the hose. It has a little dial saying 2 ounces, 4 ounces, 8 ounces, whatever. Set it to somewhere between 2 and 4. That's usually the amount. And then the water, it'll pull the stuff up, and you spray with that. Those ones can go up to 15
Still not
plus
enough.
feet. Well, at that point, it's just gotten big, and you get what you can get. You might want to start thinking about hiring someone to bring the tree down in height in the summertime after harvest. Yeah. Yeah. You take some time and look. Sometimes in the plums, there will be one that has a nice natural espalier shape to cut back to. Yeah. Okay. Question.
I would love to grow ume tree.
Yeah.
What is your experience with that, growing it here?
So ume shirokaga is the one that we carry here at the nursery for the it's called a flowering apricot, but it's that's a funny one. It's called a flowering apricot because apparently there's no word for apricot in like that language. But it's the flowering plum. Those ones do really well here. They're not made to be fresh eaten. They're not good fresh. You only make a product out of them. The umeboshi or various things, pickling it, etc. And they do really well. You have to treat it like an apricot though, because it is genetically an apricot. So it's better to prune those in the summertime after harvest. If you prune them in the wintertime, they are more susceptible to fungal things because they're genetically apricot. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, kind of going to the topic of mulching again.
Yeah.
So, how would you say, like, if we were, we have kind of trees, and it sort of blends into parkland, so it's kind of this natural grass around the trees, and we kind of left the leaves to revitalize the soil.
Sure.
Like, is that sort of a natural mulch, or would you still recommend adding additional mulch?
Yeah, so if you've got a natural mulch layer, would I add more? It depends what kind of tree it is. Depends how healthy it is. If it feels like it needs more of some oomph. Usually 2 to 4 inches of mulch is the goal. Like a natural duff layer that's 2 to 4 inches is fine. So if you don't have 2 to 4, you might want to add some more. And you can use bark mulch, you can use compost, as long as, like, mulch is technically, you know, any physical object that separates the soil zone from the sky and the sun. It's just a barrier. My mom likes using cardboard, you know. Some people, like, I've had people use some strange things, but as long as you're making that physical mulch barrier layer, you're still helping the soil have a better, healthier soil environment because it's staying moist, it's not drying out. If you have like a blow service or something and you don't have any mulch at all, like we were saying in the first class, it just dries out and literally all of your beneficial microorganisms die if it's being blown because of the hot, the dry, and you're going to have no workers. Your microorganisms are your free workers that deliver nutrients. They mine the nutrients for you and they deliver it to the tree. If you don't have them, you have to put everything in yourself, and it's just more work, honestly. Yeah, and they're going to be more susceptible to drought, stress. Mulch is great. Okay.
So if you put, like, say, California poppy or something like to cover the soil, would that work just as well?
If you use a natural plant cover like California poppy, it is not the same. It's not going to be as beneficial. But you could put soil or mulch down and then put that on top if you want to have something growing there that doesn't interfere with the natural water needs of the plant. But I wouldn't. That's not enough. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
When you plant a new tree, besides putting the soil on the top, you already have the weed barrier, and you want to put something on top to hold it down. Do you recommend to put your rocks?
If you have a tree that you're planting and you have a weed barrier,
right?
Would I put something else on top like rocks or mulch? If you otherwise don't have anything, yeah, you can put some mulch, you can put some rock. Weed barrier makes it really hard to deliver nutrients to the plants, so I find them difficult to work with, and I don't necessarily recommend having them under the canopy of the tree. Just because it's hard. It's really hard to get nutrients down to the tree. It's not going to go down unless you're doing a regular liquid fertilizer solution, maybe. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you have weed barrier, it's way harder to fertilize.
But if you put the little rocks on it, you put the weight on the tree on the roots, would that hurt it?
No, having rocks on top of the tree roots will not hurt it.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want to bury the trunk with whatever mulch you use. You want to have just a couple inches of space between the trunk and wherever your mulch is starting. Because if you have anything pressed right up against the trunk, it's going to cause moisture and rot problems. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you understood exactly. What I thought you were saying is that you have the weed barrier, you have mulch, and then you were going to put the rock on top of that. Is that what you mean?
Well, let's say you don't have mulch.
Oh, okay. Either way is fine.
Yeah,
either way is fine.
Having rocks on top of the root system will not hurt the root system.
Okay.
I was thinking you meant putting the rocks on top of the mulch so it doesn't get blown away or dogs digging it. And I think that's actually a great idea. Maybe it wasn't what you meant, but it sounds great.
I'll do that then.
Okay, I want to ask, so...
Can I ask something on the weed barrier? Because he just reminded me of something. So if we have weed barrier, how far away from the base should it be?
If you have weed barrier, how
for
far
the rest
from
of the
base
yard
of the tree will it be? I'll give you the personal, honest answer. I do not like weed cloth because it's so difficult to work with anything where you need to work the soil and add nutrients at the base of the tree. It's really hard. It interferes with my job, so I'm not a fan of it. I would have it be multiple feet away. I would want it to be like 4 feet away at least. Personally, but some people have it all the way up to the trunk, and I've cut it sometimes and peeled it back, and then you can put that back if you want to have that weed benefit, and then you only have weeds coming up in the cracks.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would definitely try and have it as far away as you can, or have a big X that you can fold out when you need to access what's underneath. Yeah.
Okay.
That's on the same top. That's what I did, but when you try to put compost, it doesn't matter where you put on top, they're still gonna go down eventually.
So if you put compost on top of weed mat, will the benefit of it go down eventually? I don't think that it's worth doing if you're putting it on top of weed mat. It will percolate down to a point, but it's way better to put it underneath the weed mat. Way better. A lot of time if you have like bark mulch, it actually traps a lot of the water that would go down if you don't have a deep watering system. So if you're having compost or something on top, it's kind of acting like a mulch almost. It's going to hold a lot of the water, and it would take a soak to get the benefits to go down as deep as you want it to. You'd have to soak it probably on a low soak for a couple hours to get the benefits down. You'd have to do that regularly to get the benefits down there. So it's better to have it actually in contact with the top of the soil. Yeah. What time are we at?
Probably officially done, but
So we're officially done at this point. Dorothy, you can keep recording if you want. Otherwise, I'm happy to keep taking questions for a while. I didn't really go into the normal layout of the class, but that's because most of you were already here for the first time. So I'm happy to just keep taking questions. You are free to leave at any point if you'd like. Okay.
Is the leaves that fell off the tree will be the mulch?
If can the leaves that fall off the tree be the mulch? They can unless they were diseased.
or if you have like
Disease
codling
or
moth, for
pest.
example, you really want to
Yeah,
get
so
rid
if
of
you've got like a mulberry tree that didn't have any pests, it didn't have any diseases, the foliage falls, that could be a mulch. But if you had a peach with peach leaf curl, you would want to remove those leaves.
I have this
some ways pruning is pretty similar. Peaches are not
Oh, that's a fungal problem. I want to mention anyone that sat down that didn't get a coupon, there's a 10% discount coupon at the table. It's like if you're spending over $50, so just reminder it exists. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. I got 4.
Okay. The only one that if anyone wants to perform